Geared for Growth. I'm your host, Mike Mortlock from MCG Quantity Surveyors. Today, we're talking everything finance in and around building a multi-property portfolio. We're talking to an absolute guru in the space, Aaron Whybrow, who's also a very funny guy. He's the owner of the mortgage broking firm Diagnostics and Finance. We talk to him about all sorts of principles around lending, serviceability calculators, how you can manipulate the system to appear better to the bank, the difference between a foundational bank and creating lending strategy around where you are in your property portfolio, structures, and whether there is a glass ceiling to how much you can actually borrow, and much, much more. It's an awesome interview with Aaron, and I think that every property investor that's looking to build a portfolio, whether they're starting or in the middle of that journey or even towards the end, will get some value out of this one. Anyway, here's Aaron. Aaron Whybrow, thanks for joining me on Geared for Growth.
Oh, I'm great to be able to be on Geared for Growth. It's a wonderful podcast.
It's got a name and everything. We're all proper. We even got a logo. Fancy that.
Yeah.
Still can't get the intro music right though. That was me playing the guitar 5 years ago, nearly, and it's just kind of like, oh, we can't afford to pay anyone for this.
Well, there's that thing you could move it into second gear and have a bit of a race car in there because we're gearing up for growth.
Wow. I'm going to have
to
ask you to sign over the rights to that because that's way too clever for me to come up with.
Just take it as a gift.
Now, Aaron, this is a very serious podcast, if people can't tell already, because the topic is really, really important, because I think most people that are listening to this show, all 4 or 5 of them, are either in a situation or will be in a situation where lending and their borrowing capacity and their ability to grow their portfolio based on serviceability calculators and what the banks will give them is driving them insane. So you're our expert today to be able to navigate those waters. Can you kick us off with some of the things the typical things that are holding investors back from growing that multi-property portfolio?
Well, I was thinking about that, and the banks are starting to get a little bit of grey going on here with all the changes that they're doing, because we have to nearly every month where the expenditure measures or the calculator changes, redo that for a lot of our clients that are building portfolios because the capacity is changing. But the main key one that I'm finding a lot of blocks for investors building portfolios is knowing what they want. We've had clients come to us saying everyone else is doing it, so we've done it, but we don't know where to go now. They may need some tips on what they've already got and how to manage it better. They may even find that they don't have one of your magical tax depreciation reports to help out, because they've just been doing it because everyone's doing it, and they might be finding a property and they have a fear of missing out on the property. They might be under the wing of the real estate agent trying to sign off on cool-offs and not cool-offs, and can you just throw another $5,000 on, $10,000 on, and they have it that they don't know what they want, or their fear of missing out. Everyone's doing it. They look at the property before the lending. So if they need that help with the banks, you've got to look at getting the bank organized before you get involved in the property and its numbers and all the beautiful things that come with building a portfolio. And everything starts from just knowing what you want.
That's a little bit disappointing, because we've been talking about having the vegetables before you can have your dessert or your lollies on this podcast for quite some time, right? So when someone comes to you saying, all right, well, my end goal is to buy a principal place of residence in 5 years, so I want to invest in properties to get the equity to do that. Like, at least something like that is a plan where you can go, all right, well, I can use some strategy that's not going to harm that. It's going to make it easier, right?
Yeah, that's a great example, because when they are coming to me to say, when you unpack that, it's sometimes you do have to dip your toe in the water. I want my owner occupied in a few years' time. Let's get a couple of properties to build up the equity. Let's look at the strategies on what you need to do, whether you're going to hold those ones, use those ones to just sell and get your owner occupied. All those little strategies can come into it. But I suppose if you got that long-term goal and you got the short-term one of buying a property, you may buy one and you might find that this investment vehicle is just not for me. It's not what I signed up for. So then you can start something and then see if you like it, have a good experience. Fingers crossed, everyone that starts out going to their first investment property can have a good experience, understands what the buffers are involved and the whole thing. So then they get that good experience, we get the momentum, so that in the few years' time they want their owner occupied, we can just jump in and structure that the way they wish, or hopefully they don't need me for their owner occupied, because let's face it, the debt on your owner occupied is not deductible.
Yes, and I hate things that are not deductible. I made a career out of deducting things. Now, for the marketplace that we're in, you know, and perhaps this was a little while ago, and you can comment on this, but there has seemed to have been quite a bit of competition and cashbacks around. I'm just wondering, you know, how counterproductive can it be to just be chasing the lowest interest rate or these cashback offers? Is this kind of like a short-term sugar hit that can derail your long-term goals?
Well, I think everything with the promotions the banks come out with to entice new customers to come to them, and it's a very backward system where they are enticing new customers to give the new customers the good rate. The new customers get the cashbacks. The new customers get everything served to them on a plate, and then you can have a customer that's been with that particular lender for like many years, and their interest rate's 1% higher. I've even seen nearly 2% higher than what they're offering new customers before it's reviewed. So it's really interesting that the sugar hit there is there. So I would say the active chasing cashbacks can be counterproductive in your property portfolio growth. If that's all you're after and you don't want a property portfolio, go nuts if you wish. But it can be productive because there's application, there's interest rates, there's incoming, outgoing fees, and it just depends. If you want a cashback, typically a lot of my customers, when they are going down the line of going to a lender, and let's say they have a mindset that it's a bonus that they get a cashback because that lender was specifically there for their policy portfolio of what they needed for their next property. That lender is there for them to access the money to get it, and going from there. And the other thing with cashbacks is if the interest rates I'm seeing on the cashback lenders are usually 0.2, 0.3 higher than some of the lower ones that are in the market. So there's some lenders that are quite low at the moment, but they don't offer cashbacks. So it's interesting. You buy you buy a car on 1% finance, and you wonder where the interest rate's gone. It's probably gone into the price of the car. So this is the interesting thing here. So if it's going to take you 3 years to get the savings off the interest rate you're moving to for the cashback, is it really worth it? Or is it the intent that this cashback for a property investor is just the bonus on the top for them building their portfolio? That's how I look at it.
You know, it's triggered into our psychology though, Aaron. It's cash back.
Yeah.
What are you not understanding? It's free money.
There you go. It is free money. But if you have you ever looked at the loan contracts where it states how much interest you're going to pay over a 30-year period if the interest rate stays as it is on the contract?
You really have
a little bit more than $3,000, man. You
really have a way of taking the fun out of free money stick I'm trying to run with. But no.
Free money. Yep. I love free money.
You're right. A very, very important point. Something I wanted to ask you about was this mythical beast known as the serviceability calculator. People live and die by the formulas in this calculator. I've even heard tell, over the flickering embers of a midnight fire that these calculators have got into the hands of mere mortals, and they've been able to, play with them and use them to try and manipulate their situation to get the loans. What can you in real terms tell us about these serviceability calculators?
Oh, well, if I actually show you, I'd probably have to kill you. You should see the disclosure agreements we have to sign here. They're a bit magical. When you press that button on Excel, and I don't know whether anyone's played with Excel, where you put some magical equations in and it magically calculates something. Well, we press that thing called enable macros, and that's just like next level spiritual realm, you could say, when we look at these borrowing calculators. But there is a few things that you can control. So there's a lot of things that the property investor can control, and one is that you control. Well, to a point, you can control your income. To a point, you can pay off debts that aren't serving you on your borrowing capacity. And if you really want to look at how capacities work, this is where your mortgage broker comes in. So a couple of tips on understanding your borrowing capacity or the servicing calculator is if you've got your next purchase, your current purchase you're on, or you've just finished a purchase, you can, or you're in between the purchase, you can ask your mortgage broker, what is your capacity? Where is it problematic? Why did it come up with that figure? Maybe it's because you got a 40 grand credit card and maybe a 10 grand would actually enable you to add more rent with the next property purchase, reduce or cancel a card, change how something's working to help you understand the calculator for your next subsequent purchase. So understanding what's in the calculator, understanding where your borrowing capacity is, and understanding what you need to add in or change around in your own circumstances to make that better can all come into the piece of looking at it. And if you're really wanting to have a look at how the banks are going to assess your repayment on your new debt, is that you can take the current interest rate, go to a loan repayment calculator, add 3% to that interest rate, put in your loan amount you want, and that's what the bank's going to have on your top loan of seeing if you can afford that in your budget. So
Right.
that's a really interesting way. There's a lot of other factors that come into it. Every bank, this is where the competition of the bank comes in. The borrowing capacity calculator is where a lot of the competition, how they treat rental income, how they treat credit card debt, how they treat business debt, how they treat profit on a business. Are they looking at 1 year, 2 years? How they look at external debt to what you've got outside the lender you're currently going with. Those things is where the competition of the banks come into it, in addition to what we just spoke about, free money with cashbacks and really low rates.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, are there any ways to game the system? I mean, I've heard. Oh, I mean, I'm pleased to.
Let's manipulate the system, eh?
Let's stick it to the man. I've heard people, paying say 3 months worth of expenses in advance, or getting a stack of cash and stuffing it into a mattress and living on cash for a few months just to look good for the banks. I mean, people do that with logbooks and the ATO. Like I'll keep the logbook, but I'll make sure I book a few sort of trips here and there, and it'll all work out. Big shout out to the ATO. Not advocating any of that stuff, but what can we do?
What's the good thing is that what is it? The ATO looking at tax planning and minimization to be in the rules. Lending, like your mattresses and bucketing cash and all that other stuff is probably not the thing that we want to see. Right. But there are some really key things that we can do to help our situation increase the borrowing capacity. And how you can help with your income and expenses in a way that helps your serviceability. And that I categorize this into 3 parts. So you got your self-employed and you got your employee, and then you've got what we just talked about with the bank policies, where they compete on policies, and the banking borrowing capacities can range quite dramatically between one and another. So bar that one's the easy one because of how they chart, how they treat everything. But with your self-employed, you can do a little bit of planning. Like we're sitting in March 2023 at the moment, and we've got this thing coming up that's 30th of June 2023, which is the end of the tax year. So there might be some planning that you've done to help you not only property invest, but jointly with your accountant about your tax planning as well. So you can look at expenses. What expenses are in your business to help your net profit, because that's what the bank looks at, your net profit. Is there an additional customer you get that gets the turnover that you need to get your profit up? Is there other things that you can look at, like your current portfolio, increasing your rental income? So right now, we're seeing a lot of property investors coming to us and saying, oh, the rental income's gone up by $10, $20. And then if they've got 10 properties, $10, $20 across 10 properties can be quite significant on the calculator. PAYG people can look at pay rises. Maybe they haven't asked for a while. Commissions. How the commissions vary each year, overtime, shift allowances, all that sort of stuff can come and change your borrowing capacity as you continue to do those. You could even go for a higher paying job. That increases the income too. You just got to be careful with some of the banking policies around industry changes. Then there's always the rental income, paying down debt, getting rid of extraneous debt you don't need. And so really what I'm saying is that making lots more money is pretty good to go to the bank and manipulate how they can give you your borrowing capacity if you earn more legitimately.
Yep. So cancel your credit card and go and make more money. Those are the two obvious ones, right?
Yeah, and a bit of planning for the self-employed, because they, in the main for lower cost lending, they're looking from tax year to tax year.
And if the average person said to their mortgage broker and their accountant, guys, here's what I want to do, and let's say I have a business, or there are levers that can be pulled. Here's what I want to do. Can you guys talk together to sort of figure out what we can alter? I was going to say manipulate. The ATO
Alter's probably better.
They're already listening. What can we alter? Like, is that a conversation that accountants and mortgage brokers like yourself will regularly have? The Geared for Growth Property Investing podcast is presented by our business, MCG Quantity Surveyors. If you're an investor or a property professional looking to get the best tax depreciation deductions for yourself or your clients, please get in touch with us at mcgqs.com.au. It's our mission to help as many property investors as we can to maximise their claims and maximise their property education as well.
Well, I do a lot of work with self-employed people. I love working with my PAYG people as well, where we jump into around this time of year, or usually coming up sort of to the end of the calendar year or into this area. People are looking at what they are doing to plan for their tax return, plan for, and that can include you going to go into growth for your business or anything like that, or you need to tell people like your accountant that you're going to go and buy more property. So in the tax planning sessions around this time of year, can be a good time to go, hey, Mr. Accountant, we're going to, my tax planning session is not only to help me with the tax and manage that and make sure I can pay it, is also, I want to borrow with property too. How is that going to change my tax position? And by the way, do you have 5-10 minutes that we can have a 3-way conversation with my broker to understand how that the banking serviceability is going to plug into that for me, so that when we come into the September area, for our accountants, we give them only a month we give them 2 months to get the tax returns to us to do stuff, maybe September, sometimes July. We pushy brokers sometimes, that we can get the tax returns and hit the ground running and do the planning and make sure they got their deposits all right, their equity changed around, their incomes where they need to do, the bank's policies are all lined up. And you've got that. That's the start of the team, really, for a self-employed person, accountant and broker. Make sure you can access the money. And that's where I would start with getting that level of detail going, is earlier the better, before you go to a property.
Yes, good. I think that's the second time we've said have a plan, right?
Yes.
Now, I've heard you talk about mysterious things like platform banks and strategies like lenders in sequence. Can you let us have a little bit of a look behind the curtain on those ones?
Well, platform bank, I think I made up the word. I sometimes make up the words. I think the staff think I make up words every day here. Platform banking, I like to use. There's no bank that's called platform bank. Maybe there is, but this is the way I use it. So this is where you have a starting bank, a bank that can service a whole range of your needs. They may be fairly restrictive in their borrowing capacity, which is not a bad thing when we're starting out. And it may be, this is the bank that allows you to have the offset accounts or even multiple offset accounts. They have all the other features outside the home lending that you need to continue running your business, running your own life, having the offset accounts. Because as we start going down, looking at other lenders, some of that's, if we go to them first, they may not have the offset accounts. They may not have the branch access or the ATM access or the fast movement of money around the place when you have impeding settlements going. So from my perspective of looking at a platform bank, I'm looking at a bank that allows us that flexibility when we're starting out on the investment journey, or you can add it in a bit later on in the investment journey, 2, 3, 4 properties down the track. We can still restructure into those areas. But I use the platform bank to look at how can we build a good foundation that has all the features and ability that you have to be able to then leapfrog into 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 properties from there.
And that's where you're talking about the lenders in sequence. So once we've got the
Yeah.
bank, it's kind of like, all right, well, we're at this position. Which lender is going to suit us at that point in time? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so we spoke about how they compete between policy, which ones judge different debts differently. So if we went to a bank that in a sequence, and we went to the bank that gives us the most borrowing capacity right now, when they come to judge their debt against the new debt that you want, you may lose the benefit of how they judge other people's debts. So some banks will judge other people's debts as not a risk to them because it's not their debt.
Yeah.
But when it's their debt, they're very protective of themselves.
Yep.
So if you've got all your lending with the lender that gives you all the borrowing capacity, you may tap up very, very quickly on your borrowing capacity. So if you use the platform and you strategically maybe put one or two with that platform bank, and then you can go to another one, then you can go to another one. So basically using the right lenders in the right sequence maximizes the borrowing capacities so that for different points in the purchase cycle. So using them out of sequence can change your borrowing capacity, and also you may need to spend more time when you come to a broker that specializes in multi-property. You may have to spend a little bit more time restructuring some of your finances to be able to extract out the next borrowing capacity that you need in the right area. So if you got the right sequence, that's cool. If not, well, we probably need to spend more time on the lending to plan for your next purchase. So it doesn't put you out of the game. It just, for me, I like to talk about the sequence and get the right sequence and then readjust along the way.
If we feel like we have got that right, and we're still sort of hitting our head on a brick wall with lending, what is the power of structures that can perhaps, release new finance for investors?
Yeah, structures are a really, really interesting thing. There's I'll say there's four types of structures that I get into conversation, and it might be a little bit tricky that I'm going to talk about one structure as yourself to borrow money under. The next structure that everyone knows about is the self-money super fund area, and that can be quite easy to understand because super in that instance is typically isolated and ring fenced around and doesn't affect the super doesn't affect your person doesn't affect your super in the main.
Yep.
And then you've got trust structures and company structures that you can put in outside that super area that can help with the borrowing capacity question. And the last one that's really interesting around structures is bank product offerings. So this is probably for more of the commercial guys, where you can have products like lease doc. So you can borrow in your own name for a commercial asset, and the lease covers the debt, right, and it ring fences your borrowing capacity away. So the structure thing can come into it, and I think from examples of clients, and one structure is not right for another person to another person, and everyone will play the game on an individual basis. So I've got people that have done a lot of lending in trust structures for a goal of what they want to do in the future. I've got the combo deal where they've got personal for tax, maybe through to structures for other borrowing capacities, asset protection. Not that that's my world. And self-managed super fund, we find because of the ring fence nature of being able to gear and leverage in that area, whilst they may need to tidy up some personal debt or increase their income in another area, but they really, really keen to keep investing.
Yep. And with all that being in place, is there really a glass ceiling of how much someone could borrow? What I'm sort of saying, Aaron, is I want you to admit that there's a limit to your powers. I mean, there has to be in some way, right?
Oh, I suppose we were talking about bank valuers just before the podcast, and how much we think we're talking to, say, the god of what they give us related to insurance values, valuations, rental income, and all that stuff, which could either be inside or outside their scope. But I get asked the question about glass ceiling on borrowing capacity all the time, and I'm going to answer the question that there's not really if you add one ingredient into it. So time heals all wounds, or time heals all borrowing capacity issues. So what I mean about that is over time, rental income goes up, borrowing could go down.
Yep.
Income goes up, equity changes. And over a period of time, with the right set of circumstances, you could continue borrowing. And as you're buying more property, you're adding more income as well. So if you add the factor of time, that's an interesting concept to put out there related to caps. If you want to do it fast, absolutely, there's going to be a cap at one point in time because you've maxed out. Maybe you've taken all your borrowing as interest only and it's out to wazoo and you've done everything you can to get there. And there could be a cap, absolutely. But if you add in strategy, team, time, I reckon there's a case to make that it doesn't cap out.
So rather than a glass ceiling, it's a glass elevator that continues to rise with time. How's that for a metaphor?
There we go. I like that. I might have to buy the rights to that one.
I was going to say you could take that to the bank, but that is an unfortunate pun. The good old days of lending, people talk about, the Wild West, where it was like, do you have no deposit? Well, then you'll love our 105% loans at XYZ Bank. Like, have a lot of people made money in property because they were just present at that time in the Wild West, where you could borrow money just on a whiff of a job and purchase property on the cheap, and we've obviously seen huge growth.
I would imagine that there's always that factor of reflection that we all have, whether we've got properties, don't have properties, wished we did properties, just starting out now and knowing our friends have been able to be in the Wild West of getting what it was in the past. But I think the reflection that I've had to take on that one is, what about our kids in 20 years time or 30 years time, wherever the age is, about them wanting to enter the market in an unknown rate, an unknown lending policy, and an unknown purchase price. And I think if we look over time, all of us were kids at one point that we wouldn't have known the policy that we were going to be faced. So right now, the cards that are dealt is that we've got an interest rate that's risen from record lows. We've got banking policy changing all the time. I'm grateful for all the changes because that's why I've got a job. And yeah, it could have been easy in the past, but I could tell you that there is still a bank that can get you 122% of the borrowing of a purchase price, but It's typically owner occupied and it's secured by mum and dad to get to that point.
Right.
So
default
bit of smoke and mirrors there.
Take your knees.
Yeah, smoke and mirrors there. And also there's the advent of a couple of lenders that aren't the cheapest lenders that have thrown out the 40-year loan terms as well. So has the Wild Wild West gone away? I think the concepts are there, but underneath the hood, we've got guarantors and cross security and a whole range of other things that allows us to get up to that point.
Yeah. And that's a whole other show. I want to ask you before I go into your tips for investors to win this finance game, I want to ask you about the concept of debt recycling and asset recycling. So we do, for anyone that's sort of new to the investing game, I think we'll still probably know that the principal place of residence, the interest component is not deductible where it is on an investment property. So being able to move those between them can have an advantageous tax effect. But what else is at play there?
Yeah, I think there's the aspect of debt recycling comes into your world. You love to deduct stuff. So if you've got an owner-occupied mortgage that's non-deductible and you've got some cash you want to put in investments, there can be the concept of recycling that cash through your owner-occupied debt or in effect paying your debt down on your owner-occupied and then re-borrowing it, so to speak, or recycling it. So that's around debt recycling and trying to get your non-deductible debt down where you have cash to do so, instead of dumping the cash into the property that you're buying and still having the non-deductible debt. But then in regards to the asset recycling, which I'm probably stepping outside my world a little bit, but what can happen is that if you've got an older asset pool, really old asset pool, and it's costing you a lot of money to hold on to it, the maintenance is up, you've had to change all the plumbing, you've had to redo all the kitchens and bathrooms, or you're about to, or you can forecast that inevitable maintenance cost out. Maybe you could recycle your asset. Maybe before you invoke all the problems that a tenant says you're going to have to get into and replace all the plumbing and all that stuff, maybe you could forecast what's going on there and you can sell that property off before you have to spend that money. And then you can recycle it maybe into a newer asset or something that doesn't need so much maintenance. Or you might be able to get the higher higher yielding properties in the upwards interest rate cycle. So asset recycling could help your position out as well. And you obviously still need to have some borrowing on there too.
Yes. Yeah, I think the trouble is, as investors, all the pundits sort of say, like, you never sell an investment property. You got to buy and hold for the long term, and the costs of getting in and out are so high. But sometimes the numbers will it's the meritocracy of the Excel spreadsheet, right? It's like, if you actually sell this property, yes, you have to pay agents' fees and capital gains tax and that sort of stuff, but the trajectory of that is going to be far less than if you went out and purchased another property. And you're saying there's a mortgage component to that as well.
Yeah, and I suppose the other thing is that you might get it when you go to sell the property, that you may forecast that outside your ability to hold, and you want newer assets or higher yielded assets because of your personal circumstances. There's probably an investor out there that wants to come in and probably knock it all down or fully renovate it because that's their personal goal on that stuff too.
Yes.
So that's everyone's. It comes down to that. Why do we have like Facebook Marketplace or something, or eBay, where we're selling all our stuff, and it's another person's junk is another man's treasure. So just don't. I suppose the goal is, don't stick your head in the sand if you are able to forecast some problems with a property coming up. That you could make a decision now versus going through a problem of all the holding costs that are associated with that, or valuation caps or things like that are outside the lender or broker's control. Make the decision now instead of burying your head in sand if you need to.
Excellent. And, it all comes to planning and strategy. We've gone way over time just because, like, I've learned a lot. And I think this is one of the biggest stumbling blocks for investors that want to go multi-property portfolio, I should say. Aaron, finish this off with what are your big takeaways? If there's only a couple of things that people can remember from this, or that you can impart to the world, assuming my ratings are that good, what would you say? So
the big takeaway: always plan ahead and calculate. Get your spreadsheet out and calculate. And the other one is get the right team around you to help calculate this out for you, so you can go in eyes wide open, understand the borrowing, and then you can fall in love with the property portfolio process, or get the right opportunities inside your property portfolio to get to your goals.
Brilliant. And that's what we want to do, get to the goals. Thanks, Aaron, for sharing all of your gold today. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks, Mike.
Cheers.